Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am making a birthday card. This birthday card happens to be for my husband, and I am using this Tailored Expressions. This is called Great Outdoors stencil set. It has a very small little like 3x4 stamp set there with it that has some really small silhouette images in it. These stencils come labeled. They are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4 in the bottom right corner, and they also have little registration marks to help you line things up. We'll be using all 4 stencils today, and I am just going to mainly focus on this top right circle-ish one. But I am going to stencil all 4 of these images twice. I can always use the other ones for something else later, but for now I really am focusing on that top right one. I'm showing you some Distress Oxide inks that I'm going to be using to do my stenciling today. I kind of like that chalky finish that they have, and I will list all the colors that I'm going to be using down below. Here I have my waffle flower grit mat, and I have 2 pieces of HAMMERMILL cardstock that I have cut to 6x6. And then I'm going to start placing on my stencils. Now, normally when you stencil, you can use this grip mat to hold your stencil and your cardstock in place. But when you cut your paper the same size as your stencil, that does not work. So I just have some satin masking tape from Altenew that I'm going to use to hold my stencil in place so that it doesn't shift around. This first stencil has a lot of water on it, so it has mainly all water on it. So I'm going to be using some Speckled Egg Distress Oxide ink to stencil in like the water sections. And I'm using mini ink blending brushes. If you wanted to be less, I guess you could say specific, or if you wanted to make this go a little bit faster, you could just use a larger blending brush and cover more area at one time. But I eventually, as we get on to further stencils, I'm going to be using multiple colors on one stencil. So I am opting to use my smaller blending brushes here. If you'll notice, I did take time to ink blend into those registration marks. I ink blended into 3 corners, and then I will continue to use those as guides to help me line things up. So I'm going to do the first one, and then I'm going to do the exact same process for the second panel. And I'm going to do that for all of the cards. As I ink blend, I'm going to do 2 panels. I'm going to try to do kind of a, it's kind of like paper piecing, but not really. It's kind of like those shadow boxes that you get that have like multiple layers and levels, but not really. I've seen other people do this and they've done it successfully. I just have never tried it before, but I wanted to try it on this card. I felt like these images would not be hard to fussy cut, and that's a little bit of what we're going to be doing today is some fussy cutting. So we've moved on to the second stencil. I have antique linen, I think that's brushed corduroy and forest moss. So that may actually be walnut stain. Anyway, I have a light and a dark brown, and then I have that antique linen. This is the brushed corduroy. So that other one is the walnut stain. So same process. I'm just ink blending in the specific areas that I want, and I have their packaging right in front of me. You can see it kind of in the top of the screen there. That is what I'm using to reference often, just to ensure that I am stenciling in with the colors that I want to stencil in. So I'm going to start speeding this up a little bit because I'm not doing anything fancy. You could do multiple colors on each section of the stencil. You could do, if you had like specialty embossing powders, you could use those and just ink blend a color down and then put, you know, a VERSAFINE or a Versamark ink on there or some other embossing ink and sprinkle on your powder. You could do pastes inside certain areas if you wanted to. You could have a lot of like creative freedom with this should you desire, but I just wanted to stick with my Distress Oxides. I haven't used those in a little bit, and I wanted to give them a little bit of love today. One of the things that I will say is my ink pads were really, really juicy. As of filming this video, I have given my ink pads a spa day, and so they were very, very juicy. And I did have a couple areas where I started to get some ink kind of seeping under the stencil, and I am a very aggressive ink blender, so that doesn't help either. So this is everything stenciled in. I did a fairly decent job of getting things to line up. I had one stencil that I was kind of struggling to get things to line up, and if I was a little more careful, I probably could have gotten it to line up perfectly. But the registration marks that I ink blended in really did help for the most part. Here, I'm just showing you that I'm going to go ahead and heat set these. Like I said, my ink pads were very juicy, and when I go to die cut them, I really don't want the ink to smear or get onto my cutting plates. I have a Simon Says stamp like nesting circles die here, and I picked a circle that is just a little bit smaller, just a hair smaller than kind of the radius of the circle. And I cut out one, and then I am going to go ahead and place the negative over the next one that I want to die cut. And then I'm going to nestle in, and I'm trying to make sure that my pattern is lining up and is continuous. Then I'm going to nestle in the die. It kind of fits in like a puzzle piece, and then I'm going to run it through my die cut machine. I did go ahead and cut out another like circle of the same size. I don't end up using that. I think mainly because I forgot about it. But I was going to use that as another way to add a layer, but I forgot about it. So here I'm going to do some fussy cutting. I was initially trying to be very careful around this kind of grass, and then I was like, meh. And so I just kind of went with the illusion of the flow of the grass. And then I'm going to cut out each of these individual sections. I want it to look like a little tiny shadow box. I want there to be lots of layers of dimension, and it didn't quite turn out like I wanted it to, but it's okay. It was something that I would probably revisit again later and just try to, it'd be something that I would revisit again later. But when you fussy cut, you want to put your scissors in your dominant hand and then move around the paper with your non-dominant hand. That gives you smoother cuts and gives you a little bit more control. So I'm just going to finish cutting each of these little sections out. When I'm done with that, I did have some like white core of the paper showing through. So I just took whatever ink was left on the blending brush and just kind of brushed that along the edge of the paper just to kind of knock that white, stark white down some. You could use a black marker, you could use, an alcohol marker or something like that to accomplish the same look. I just wouldn't use anything that is water reactive, so I wouldn't use like a water brush or a watercolor or anything like that, because these inks are reactive with water and your pigment may move. So if that doesn't bother you, then by all means use whatever you like. But for me, I just used this residual ink that was on the blending brush. When that was all done, it was time to start layering. So I grabbed a pair of tweezers just to kind of help me hold some of these smaller pieces together, get a hold of some of these smaller pieces. And then some of these are going to be applied with glue. Some of them are going to have 2 layers of foam tape. And the foam tape I'm using is from Amazon. I have been really pleased with this foam tape. I think it works really well. The backer release is very nice. It doesn't have an odor. Its loft is good. I've just been really pleased with this particular. There's a lot to a roll, and it's very inexpensive. But use whatever foam tape you have. I've used Dollar Tree foam tape, foam squares in the past. Use whatever you've got. So you saw me lay down kind of those bluish green pieces that we did in the speckled egg down with liquid glue. Then I'm going to add 1 layer to this particular piece right here. And then the next layer, which is the green, is going to have, 2 layers. No, this layer is going to have 1 that I'm working on right now. This is kind of that forest moss color. Then the next brown, which is the walnut stain, that's going to have 2 layers of foam tape. And then what we did in the stormy sky is going to have 3 layers of foam tape. So we have 4 different elevations. One that is just stenciled on the base layer. The next one is glued flat, so over its existing stenciling. And then the next one is popped up with 1 layer. The next layer is popped up with 2, and then the last layer is popped up with 3 layers of foam tape. And all I do is just lay the foam tape down, remove the backer, and then put the next piece on. So it's nothing fancy, it's not hard, it's just a lot of cutting foam. So that's what it looks like from the side when it's all done. That's just to show you kind of all of the layers that we added to it. Excuse me. So I left this as it was. I was going to glue that plain white circle to it, but I opted not to, mainly because I forgot. And then we are ready to work on the card base. I did have a little smudge of color, of the wrong color in the wrong spot, so I did go back and try to kind of fix that a little bit. Here I have a 4x4 card base that I made from ColorPlan NUBUCK brown cardstock. And then I took that same cardstock and I cut a panel that was 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. Then I took that same circle that we used to do our die cutting and I cut a circle out of the middle of that. This is where I'm going to put my sentiment, and I thought about putting some of the little silhouette critters. So I'm just trying to make sure that this is going to work. It's not going to look weird. One of the things that I do wish I would have done is maybe put some texture on this little 3 3/4 inch square panel. It looks a little, I guess, plain for lack of better words, but it's okay. So I have some VERSAFINE Onyx Black ink. I have laid these 3 stamps from that same Great Outdoors set, and I've just put them kind of in the bottom left and the top right, just to kind of help your eye kind of go across the card and flow. And I do end up stamping those twice. These are very solid images. Even though they are small, they are very solid. And so I did stamp them twice. And then I'm going to stamp the sentiment. And our sentiment comes from the Simon Says Stamp Flower Block stamp set. And I'm just using the Happy Birthday. And I'm going to stamp that in the bottom right, trying to make sure it's lined up. And I'm going to use that same VERSAFINE Onyx Black ink. And I'm going to stamp it a couple times just to make sure we've got a crisp image. Once our stamping was done, I have flipped over that panel and I am adding that same foam tape that we used for all of our layers. And I'm just going around the perimeter and adding 1 layer of that foam tape. Then I'm going to peel off the backer and add a line of liquid glue. This is going to help me line this up before we actually stick it down. This is my little stamp that I used to put my company logo on, my little business logo. That just happened to be in the video. Once that is centered, I'm going to take liquid glue and apply that to the back of our little layered stenciled image and nestle that right into the circle. And then this card is complete. So I hope this inspired you. I hope you got something out of it. This is something I have never tried before. And like I said, it's something that I've learned a little bit of, I've learned from, and so I will probably revisit it at another time. But this is the card complete. So I appreciate you spending time with me. Like I said, I hope you felt inspired, and we will see you next time.